This is Peter, this is a rainy night in Boston, and what we're talking about tonight is my favourite films. Films which I think you should watch. Just really going in depth on different films and why they should really be studied for their cinematic language, just kind of enjoyed for their atmosphere and for their characters. And, some people think, I know I can be a great director, I just need to watch the right films. Well, I'm going to take you through some of my favourite films, some of my favourite directors, and we're going to have a great time reminiscing with a lot of this, because a lot of people know, some people don't, but I took a few years to watch 2 or 3 films a day, which is something that every budding director should do. You should make a list right now of your favourite films, and then, not just your favourite films, but add those as well, but add on to foreign language films, add on to the Italian neo-realist, French New Wave, Japanese cinema, Hong Kong cinema, Korean cinema, Spanish cinema, just everything, English cinema, which is something which I wasn't even in tune with until I started doing a list and started think of it, an English filmmaker not even watching some of the films like Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, Cafe Come Home. I mean, those are 2 which I already happen to know, but Kes, some of these films, and some of them, like Kes, doesn't really resonate with me, but you can it really just depends. You have to watch them. For example, I watched The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp on this list, and it became one of my top 5 favourite films of all time. So here we go. We're going to go through them one by one, and it's going to be a bit stifled because I have to remember this off the top of my head. I'm not going to look at a list. I'm not going to look at any notes. I'm just going to kind of try and remember and go through them. Okay, so, let's start with the obvious. So Tarantino films. Everything from his catalogue, whether it's Reservoir Dogs. What do I love about Reservoir Dogs? Well, I love the costume design, of course, the whole idea of the styles matching and having that as a kind of artistic point in the film. I like how kind of closed off it is, how it's all the geography, the location is pretty simple to get your head around, which is like a lot of the time simplicity is something which we work towards. And then his later films like Pulp Fiction. I love the way that you've got these stories playing with time there, and how every time you watch that film you can kind of sink into the different characters and the different stories, and how there's not really kind of like a colour scheme for that film. It just kind of goes a little bit wacky, a little bit real, a little bit all over the place. What else we got? Then we got his later films like Django Unchained. We got Inglourious Basterds. I remember watching Inglourious Basterds and just thinking, this is a cool fucking film. Anytime like someone's broken up with you or something, watch that film because it'll just, it's just a good film to chill out to just have a fucking bite to eat to or something. And just enjoy for the amazing pace of it, the amazing kind of like that first 20-minute scene, which is just one scene, and it's just like a lesson in pacing in cinema. So also with this video, I hope to get out things like pacing. I hope to go into different elements. So let's take someone like Wes Anderson. Also, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, don't want to miss that off. Great film to watch. Quentin going back to his roots almost, whilst kind of showing us, that French New Wave style which he came from, which he understood and was influenced by, and then coming back to it now. Wonderful. So let's go into, say, like a Wes Anderson film. Let's go to, for me, with Wes Anderson, obviously I love his films, but when it comes down to my favourite films of his, there's actually Darjeeling Limited, which I think everyone should watch and kind of understand for the deeper levels within that film, because there is some people write it off because they don't really get maybe the relationship between the characters, and then kind of that whole idea of letting go of this plan, letting go of an idea of what something has to be, and kind of understanding that. And you can tell, really, I hope you can tell from this video that, my kind of sophisticated knowledge of these films isn't that actually that grand. It's actually kind of, you just kind of feel them and go with them, and I feel like I'm teaching people now in this video how to watch films, but ultimately you don't have to be picking apart films for their kind of, whether you get it or not. I mean, who cares whether you get it as long as you enjoy it? As long as there's some kind of, for me, I take the atmosphere a lot. I take the colours from a lot of films and enjoy that. That's like the main reason why I'll come back and watch it again, if there's something more to watch it from. So let's say if we go down, say like Rome, open city with, I believe that's either Vittorio De Sica, Roberto Rossellini, or Antonioni. I believe that's one of them, the Italian neorealists. And you should watch a lot of those films if you want to know about a different particular way, like Bicycle Thieves, or I think it's is it Germany Year Zero or Year Zero? There's Paisan and Umberto. It's hard to remember a lot of these ones. And see, you remember, you watch these films, then you forget you've even seen them, but they're in there. The cinematic language has gotten deep within there. So that the things which stick out, you're actually able to, when the time comes, when it's necessary, you're able to use that and be influenced by it. And just to know, if you're trying to be original, so this is why I watched Tarkovsky and learned to understand him, that if you're trying to be original, for for the sake of, not for the sake of being original, but for the sake of, adding to the vocabulary of cinematic language, which is something we all should be doing, you should basically you should watch Tarkovsky films to see how he does it, see how he stays original, or David Lynch, see how he stays original, and then watch all these kind of films like, the neo-realist French New Wave, these styles, different styles and different periods, like a Renaissance period, like different kind of, like an impressionist kind of idea, or a kind of a pointillism idea if we're talking about paintings. That kind of the different waves, the different ideas. To understand them, you don't need to understand every single thing about them. You just need to know and realise that the doors are open for you to do whatever the fuck you like within the realms of what city, what kind of modern day setting you're coming from, locations you're coming from, mobilities like having an iPhone, having Uber and stuff available to you now, or having the type of kit we have now, like we're able to shoot, but are we, with this digital kind of age, are we able to get the same kind of feeling as film? Or why should we try and aim for the same kind of feeling as film? Why don't we embrace digital, like it's, Nolan, or Christopher Nolan always, even though he fights for film, really fights for film, he talks about the differences between, a clay-like substance over here and a marble-like substance over here. And I think that's actually true, even though he probably, goes back on that word now. I think really what we are talking about here is that we're using different materials, and I truly believe that. I truly believe that there are films to be watched in digital that can access way more kind of realms and scope than maybe film could, because of the limitations we had with film back then. Yes, we'd like to bring film back as well, but can we afford that as a world? Maybe not anymore. Maybe we can't afford to be doing that, or we don't want to. They won't let us make films like that anymore on a large scale. So the films of the past are gone. You're not going to be able to make Taxi Driver now, but you are going to be able to make Mr. Robot now. You are going to be able to make Better Call Saul now. You can't make Breaking Bad now, but you can make Better Call Saul, which is also free shows you should watch. Mr. Robot, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, for long-form TV that explores character, that explores kind of colour and, has some kind of depth to them. I think that they're good enough to put on the list of films, let alone TV. So, and there isn't that much TV, so say Twin Peaks, that's able to get up to that bar of film. Okay, so let's carry on. If we're talking about Truffaut or Godard, we're talking about two very different filmmakers from the same period, which means you and your friends can also go off and be different types of filmmakers. It's okay, it's what's expected of you. And if you think of yourself as some kind of like David Bowie figure or some kind of Stanley Kubrick figure, the difference between, say, like Brian De Palma and Martin Scorsese, or Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese. If we take maybe the differences there and the philosophies behind them, yeah, sure, maybe to you there is a certain filmmaker in that which stands out. And all of those films, whether you're talking about Apocalypse Now, can you compare Apocalypse Now to Taxi Driver or Scarface, or maybe some of those you don't like, but I'd like all of those. I think with Scarface, what we're talking about is that kind of grand kind of story, but also we're showing the kind of realistic Miami in a way. We're kind of showing a side to Miami that hasn't been seen on screen before, in a way which is very kind of classically cinematic, in a kind of like an epic. And then of course he comes along and he's jealous of Scorsese for making Raging Bull at the same time, and it's like you're showing gangsters in a way in New York which is actually authentic compared to maybe how I'm showing kind of immigrants in Miami, with this kind of epic, which is ultimately perceived to be a more kind of famous. I mean, everyone's seen and knows Scarface, really. You should be watching Alfred Hitchcock's first films, like say The Lodger, for example. You should be watching every director's first films. Go on IMDb right now and find out their first films. Add those to the list straight away. Look at other lists, see what you can add. If you don't know what to watch, add other lists and make other lists. The Empire Top 500 list, the IMDb Top 250 list are good places to start. And there tends to be a lot of Hollywood films on there. So you need to go on individual directors, which maybe you already like at first, add those to the list straight away. Then add directors which they like. Type in what directors do they like, find out what they like, and then find out how those directors are connected to each other. For example, Michael Powell was the husband to Thelma Schoonmaker, who is Scorsese's editor. So, and Scorsese loved The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, and particularly The Red Shoes when he was younger. Watch those films. I love those films. And watch the other films as well, like The Small Back Room or Canterbury Tale, and and what's the other one? I think it's called like Peep Shows. It's a film about. It has a great opening of like seeing a prostitute or kind of like a pervert that's going in. It's very kind of like, it reminds me of that film with Richard Attenborough, where he's like, which I also can't remember the name. Just type in Richard Attenborough and find the one where he's wearing glasses and he's a weirdo. Find that one because that's a really good film. John Hurt's in it as well. And sorry, I can't remember some of these names. Anyway, so go for maybe like your director's first films, like Richard Linklater's first film, Slacker, or more so It's Impossible to Learn to Fly by Reading Books, and see just how kind of down to earth and I'll say it, bad his very first film was. And I don't mean bad in a kind of like it's a bad film. I mean bad in terms of like anyone could do that, really. It's great because he's experimental with time with that film. He had a philosophy and he acted it out with that film. So it opened the door for me to do a similar kind of film. And then you see with films like Boyhood, you see these kind of references to that. And they're not references deliberately, they're references because that's the type of cinema which he wants to make ultimately. All he needed was a bigger budget. Okay, so now we'll reel off my kind of top 5 favourite films. So mine are After Hours by Martin Scorsese, Naked by Mike Leigh, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, Once Upon a Time in the West by Sergio Leone, and oh, where are we going to go now? Before Sunrise by Richard Linklater. Write down all of those directors and go and watch all of their films. If you're anything like me, you'll love them all. I just love them all because they're great filmmakers. I think I've introduced these films to my actors and they love them, but obviously everyone's opinion is very different. And other films I could add to that list, probably Following by Christopher Nolan. I think that's a great film. Or where are we going to go? We go Wong Kar-wai. Oh, I didn't even say Chungking Express by Wong Kar-wai. That is probably my ultimate favourite film. Fallen Angels by Wong Kar-wai, I kind of brushed it off first. It's kind of like I don't like the poster of this, it's shit. One of my favourite films of all time. A lot of films which are in cities, like middle of cities, like Breathless. What else we got? Like On the Waterfront is a great one. So obviously for me, because Scorsese is my favourite director, I'd say one of the films which crept up on me slowly and kind of, you don't realise it, but the more times you watch it, the more it means to you, was Colour of Money. Just the atmosphere and the kind of colours to it, and the characters to it, just the kind of down-to-earth realism of it. A lot of the times, the realism creeps up on you, like Buffalo 66, or, write down everything that I'm saying is a film I did for the list. With Akira Kurosawa, we're talking about High and Low, we're talking about, what's that one, the dog one? What's the dog one called? Go on his IMDb, find out what the fucking dog one's called. Stray Dogs and Straw Dogs are both great films. One is with Dustin Hoffman, one is an Akira Kurosawa film. Also, we're talking about Seven Samurai, we're talking about Yojimbo. Probably pronounced that wrong, but hey ho. The other one is Tokyo Story by Yasuhiro Ozu, which is a great film, inspired Richard Linklater. A lot of Yasuhiro Ozu films inspired Richard Linklater, I believe. Ingmar Bergman, I'm not so much of a kind of Ingmar Bergman fan, but I have seen films such as Persona, which I really enjoyed. Wild Strawberries, which kind of had some elements which I would take on board, such as, the use of wide-angle lenses in that film is amazing to me. Not that there is a massive use of wide-angle lenses in the film, I'm just saying that one particular shot stood out, and you remember it. So it's important to go through the entire 2 or 3 hours just to get that one shot in the bank. Speaking of wide angle, Terry Gilliam, films like Brazil, which is an amazing film that you should watch, particularly if you're into production design, but atmosphere as well as that world, the little details that kind of go into atmosphere, the locations are incredible, it inspires you to use the country effectively for production design if you're doing that kind of, let's say you're doing a kind of sci-fi element, that do it that way. Tarkovsky films like Solaris, just that one shot where he's going through the tunnel, just goes on, and it teaches you that you can just go on and on. You can just leave something going. Speaking about leave something going, Steve McQueen as a director, films like Shame, where he's just going and going and going. 12 Years a Slave, where is it just going and going in that film? But there are some great shots in that film, such as The Burning. I just remember about that. Or, and I'm thinking about now The Weeds from Solaris, and the kind of teacup scene with the water in the teacup and like the insect that crawls into it. Just these amazing visuals, these cinematic, original shots. Billy Wilder films can teach you a lot about storytelling, can teach you a lot about kind of effective writing as a script, which is something which you've said, but Pete, you like to kind of improvise everything, you like to be free, and you like to kind of go off the script, and yeah, but I also like a really well written script as well. You can enjoy both worlds, you can enjoy the best of both, and everyone's different, everyone's going to come at it with a slightly different tweaked style. So also we're thinking about now I'm thinking about Lars von Trier, I'm thinking about films like Nymphomaniac or Melancholia, or some of his earlier films as well, which kind of stand out as being a little bit different. And sometimes the director's earlier work doesn't necessarily reflect their later work, or vice versa. Definitely watch the whole range of every director that you. Sometimes even if you don't like them, don't just decide on a director just because you don't like one of their films. If you took Scorsese for, say, a film like Kundun, and then based his entire career off a film like that, you might not necessarily resonate with that film. It doesn't mean you're going to hate Mean Streets. It doesn't mean you're going to hate Goodfellas, for Christ's sake. So you should really give every film in the director's repertoire a go, and especially if they're known as an auteur director, definitely watch those films so you can understand fully what encompasses a certain director's style. Then the more auteurs you watch, the more the more bodies of work you're going to associate with different styles. So if you watch a film such as Sacha Ray, and compare that to the films of Andrei Tarkovsky or Wong Kar-wai or let's say Robert Rodriguez, you're going to see a different style there, because they all have individual styles, most of which were not planned. They just kind of discovered them throughout the process. And it depends a lot of the time on what are their backgrounds, where do they come from. Okay, so we're going to go into now Paul Thomas Anderson. We're going to dissect a few of his films individually, not because he's anything special than any of the others, just because I feel like doing that. So we're going to go into The Master, and oh my god, what a kind of film that's shot in a certain kind of aspect ratio and a certain type of camera, with a certain type of stock that he used to make such a beautiful looking film, in terms of colours, in terms of just like you can feel that almost. So when you see the characters, when you see the world, and almost like the dust of that world, you can almost feel the dust of that world. He's really learned from the early days about the kind of texture within the kind of shot. So you see the texture in The Master is very different than, say, the texture in Phantom Thread or the texture in Inherent Vice. And I know some of these films you might not like, some of them you may like. I didn't really get on that much with Inherent Vice, but these early films like Boogie Nights, or was a film before that? It was Hard 8, I believe. Yeah. The very different kind of texture, which are quite similar to each other. So it's about sometimes the time frame that you're coming from as well can dictate sometimes the texture. Don't let it. Try not to let it. Try and get an understanding of the camera and the lenses and everything from that time, and the stock of that time, the type of lighting of that time, what locations look like at that time, and try and do your own thing as much as possible, or staying true to the world. Now, if you're going to say that Breaking Bad is pretty much a collection of films which have come before, a lot of people don't realize this, but obviously your inspiration comes from anywhere and everywhere. And two of the directors which Breaking Bad was inspired by was Quentin Tarantino and Sergio Leone. Quentin Tarantino, inspired very much by Sergio Leone, even used his score composer Ennio Morricone, and you should listen to his scores, all of his scores, to understand about film scores and composition, and the use of silence and the use of being quirky and David Bowie-like with a score composer, and to try and put that in your films somehow. Slow cinema is something which Breaking Bad kind of understood from Sergio Leone, the whole idea of out in the desert, and Tarantino used a lot of his cinematic language, borrowed kind of a referential way. If you think about just the kind of slow cinema and how that's affected independent cinema over the years, it has been vital for me to use slow cinema as effectively as possible. It's the way in that I learned about time in cinema, that I would find films like Richard Linklater's later on and then understand how time is played on. Or, even in a film like Chungking Express, where it's hard to tell when slow cinema is used, you can see it. Speaking about Chungking Express, the difference between a film like Chungking Express and In the Mood for Love, and how the themes and the characters are kind of working off similar philosophies and ideas, but a very different approach to the film, a very different style that the film dictates and direction which it goes down. That one has a lot tighter lenses than the other for a start. And why? Because it's the approach, it's the treatment of that material, and it's about kind of, some of it's about focusing more on character, and some of it's about focusing more on the world and the locations around that world. A good director to look at to go from kind of like a skilled amateur to a kind of master level is Shane Meadows, as he kind of went from just his earlier kind of shorts with Paddy Considine, and also an actor's progression as well, from those kind of shorts up until what's that? Dead Man's Shoes, and then the film before that. So A Room for Romeo Brass, Dead Man's Shoes, and then finally This Is England. And to see how, he might not even use Paddy Considine in This Is England, but I think he doesn't anyway, yeah. But just the progression in terms of, obviously quality, but a lot of people think just as the camera gets better that they're suddenly going to get better, but actually, it's more about learning how to use that camera, learning how to use that lens. Of course it is. So let's just try and think of a few. Come and See is a great film for cinematic language. And the kind of real kind of atmosphere of that world. Wow, just looking into the lens. And you see more and more how looking into the lens is a really effective piece of cinematic language to get the truth across. Films like Ashes and Diamonds, films like, let's think, because I don't like all of Mike Leigh's films, which may surprise some people because of how much I love Naked by Mike Leigh. So you would think, but mostly, as you might be able to tell, that's because it's shot at night, the atmosphere is perfect, the characters are perfect for me, for what I want to do, kind of similar to After Hours in some ways, and it just fits me and my personality. That's why I love that film so much. His other films, I love the way that he works with actors, but I do not like the films, some of them, just because they don't really kind of sit well with me. I think that there is sometimes a certain element of cinematic language which is missing there, an expression of story which maybe Richard Linklater has but Mike Leigh doesn't. Maybe other people may disagree, that's fine too. Two directors who are great at slow cinema and kind of letting time tell you more about the story than anything, having the lingering second shot in a frame, in one single shot, is Denis Villeneuve. I think I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know, and John Ford, from very different times and very different types of people, very different filmmakers, and John Ford's very kind of subtle in his approach, in that he didn't really care that much, in a way, but he did in another. Whilst we're talking about slow cinema, the idea that Sergio Leone might be one of the masters of slow cinema, he also watched all of these old westerns. He watched, High Noon, and knew that shot was kind of like High Noon, and that's why he kind of included it in a way. Last thing I want to say, other than adding in these last-minute films like Submarine, the films of Spike Lee, Werner Herzog, and something like Bad Lieutenant, the first Bad Lieutenant with Harvey Keitel, and the second Bad Lieutenant, Portugal, New Orleans by Werner Herzog. The differences between those films, why you would adapt it that way, why Werner Herzog approaches films that way. Viva Zapata is one of Werner Herzog's favourite films. Go back and watch Brando films as well, watch all Dustin Hoffman films, watch all Robin Williams films, such as Good Morning Vietnam, watch all those kind of comedy films, because you can enjoy these comedy films like The Apartment by Billy Wilder, and kind of see Billy Wilder's mentor as well, which I can't think of. Type that in, figure out who that is as well. Films like Infernal Affairs, the difference between Infernal Affairs and The Departed, and I think that's a good place to end. A great way to get through this list, because this list will be difficult. It will be something that you'll want to give up or kind of skip a few films or be on your phone for most of these films, and it's fine sometimes to be on your phone through films. I do say give it the respect it deserves, but ultimately I didn't. Sometimes I watch these films on my break, on a laptop, in my car, at work, sometimes to try and fit it into the day. I watched it on my Kindle back when I had that 5 years ago, and I would then get home, start the film, watch it, have my dinner whilst I was eating it, get to the end of that film, immediately start the next one, so I'm not being lazy, I'm not, fucking about. I had the list right there, I had a printed off list that I could tick the boxes one by one as I completed them. I even split them up into a 5-film chunk, tick off those like bingo, just go through them until you've seen those films, and just pick and choose which ones you want to watch sometimes. How did I get these films? Well, some of them I bought on DVD, some of them I got illegally, or I just typed into the internet. I'm not sure how easy it is to do that to that degree anymore, on the internet. But a lot of these films are available on sites like Mubi or you just get these subscriptions and watch these films, because the one thing it might seem like just another kind of Netflix that you're paying for. Sometimes that is also a good one for some of these films, but ultimately you're paying for your experience. You're paying to one day for an actor to believe in what you're saying, because you've got your top 5 favorite films of films which have really influenced you and opened the doors for you, opened the gate for you, and made you believe that you can actually do this as a director, as a fucking career. So you better fucking pay that subscription for Mubi and get them, or you better get those Blu-rays in. I bought loads of Blu-rays of some of these directors just because, and now a lot of those I haven't even seen. I bought them, I ain't even seen them, so I got this whole collection of Blu-rays. Can someone please buy them off me, because they're just sat there, a lot of money they are. And so get the fucking Blu-ray player if you haven't already. If you ain't, then what the fuck you doing? And just go at it. Just start now. Start watching them, and then it just becomes a habit that you do every single day. Get through them like bingo, just one by one, until they're done. Until you've done 250, then do the 500, then do 1,000, then stop when you're ready. Watch all different foreign films. The foreign ones are some of the hardest to watch. Like, no one wants to watch a 1920s Japanese black and white film that's 3 hours long, but if you do it, it'll pay off. It won't be your favorite film, but some elements will make it into your future films, and someone will watch that and go, oh my god, that's my favorite shot ever. And the more that you watch, the better director you're gonna be. So the more likely you are to actually maybe make some money in the future, maybe, if that's what you care about. Just another reason to do it. Do it now. Stop this and go and do it. You won't have to stop it. I'll finish. Now, if you want to see a lot more of these videos, if you want to see my topics ranging from character to cinematic language to atmosphere to sound to score composition to anything from the philosophy of filmmaking, from just films that you maybe should be watching, I go through all these topics like really in depth quite a lot of the time, and what I'm trying to do is build this kind of like full curriculum of different topics which can be really explored and really kind of, as time goes on, just kind of mastered and dissecting each film one by one, including my own work, including the stuff that's going forward in my own journey. So if you guys are going on a similar kind of journey and you need someone to follow and to kind of work along with and to kind of be a kind of mentor figure for that, then I realise I'm just inviting myself to be your mentor, but this is what I'm planning to do. For that, I'm going to need some money. I'm going to need to be able to fund going out to places like this. I'm going to need to be able to fund making my films, and this is what I want to do for a full-time job. This is, honestly, I love doing this. So if you want to give some money and actually get access to these videos, I went to Boston, I went to New York, I went to Philadelphia, I've been to Vienna, I've been to Prague, I went to all these fancy places. But the reason why I went to these fancy places is because for a start, I wanted to go on holiday, but I also had to teach there. I had to show you guys absolutely that I am dead serious about this, not just as like a this is how you set up a camera, this is how you want to be using the triangle of exposure and all this, and whilst all of these technical things are important and almost cinematic language to like a mid shot, medium shot, long shot is important, 3-act structure is important, right? But the fact is that a film can be open-ended, so what the fuck is a 3-act structure? The fact is you can do whatever the fuck you like, really. It's just how it's judged in retrospect. Was it good in retrospect? So, is it an artistic piece? And if you guys agree, Why don't you join up? Why don't you actually, go down, press the link, and find these videos, pay for them, and get access to them. And I'll really appreciate that, and I'll be able to make more of them, and I'll be able to fund doing them maybe at a higher production value. Maybe I'll get some kind of shots of films going on in the corner at the time as well, and that'd be really cool to be able to dissect films as I'm talking about them, maybe. And we shall see where we end up. But the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I get a little bit of support, and you guys are going to get some great content because of it, because I will just not stop talking about film. And the stuff I have to talk about, the philosophy, the depth that I want to go to in this is I'm going into my own psychology, let alone, a filmmaker's kind of how far you can go with cinematic language and the philosophy of how you make a film. It's is there just one way to make a film, or is there multiple ways? Or is that whole there's multiple ways thing a big lie? So click the link, get those bloody classes going, and you start now. We'll both build up our knowledge together. I encourage fucking comments which are gonna talk about this, which are gonna talk about how we can go a bit further with some of these ideas. I'm working it out the same way you are. I'm learning just as you are, just as Martin Scorsese is still learning now. I want him to be on this channel talking to him about what the fuck is film doing now. Where do we go from here now that the greats have come and gone, and now the new greats are here, and now we've got digital, and it's all a bit different, but it's still going to the roots of cinematic language and philosophy. It's what can we do with this? Where can we go?